The intention of organizing this conference jointly has been to try and bring forward a culture and a practice of collaboration, recognizing that we need to have more sharing across our experiences, across our sectors, and the work that we're doing to address radicalization and extremism in Europe today. The conference as a whole, and I know many who are joining now have taken part in different workshops today and yesterday, the conference as a whole addresses many different topics and themes which are being worked upon by projects and organizations all across Europe. We have sessions looking at education, working with youth, city-based approaches, gender and extremism, the use of ICT technologies and the challenges that are faced there. We've had introductory contributions from speakers from the European Commission, and we're also having, for example, sessions tomorrow on looking at how to improve evaluation and learning and sharing lessons in our field, as well as a second session on city-based approaches, and much more. There's a wide range of topics, and in all of these sessions, we're trying to bring together a community of experts, practitioners, academics, policymakers, people that are working in this field from a range of different backgrounds and trying together to identify key issues, lessons, what's working, what isn't working, what are gaps, what do we need to do better, and especially to orient towards, based upon the breadth of our understanding and experience today, what are some of the recommendations that we bring forward for improving policy and practice going forward. Within the conference overall, we also have two special sessions, of which this is the first one. And the idea with the special sessions is to step back a bit from the very focused and concrete workshops we're doing, to be able to open up a broader dialogue on the state of extremism and populism today. Are we understanding it correctly? Are we addressing it in the right ways? What do we really need to know about the different dynamics and issues involved to help inform our work and to improve how we can address extremism and populism in Europe? That said, we're going to dive in now. And I'm very excited that we have 4 speakers contributing to this session. Because of our time zone and various factors, we're going to have 2 of them through submitted videos, which they developed these days just for contribution to this panel. And we're going to have 2 of the speakers live with us in the session as well. So the first speaker we're going to hear from today is Dr. Naureen Chowdhury Fink, who many may know quite well. Naureen is the executive director of the Soufan Center. She served as the senior policy advisor on counterterrorism and sanctions at the United Kingdom's mission to the United Nations, leading representation and negotiations in the Security Council and General Assembly. Previously, she was a policy specialist with UN Women and the UN Counterterrorism Executive Directorate, with a focus on integrating gender into the full spectrum of counterterrorism issues. Naureen joins us today with a video contribution, which will start off our afternoon session. We're then going to hear from Professor Kevin MacDonald. Kevin is a professor of sociology at Middlesex University, London. He holds a doctorate from the École des Hautes Études en Sciences Sociales and is a professor of sociology at Middlesex University. His research engages with new forms of democratic experience and struggle that we encounter in contemporary social movements, as well as emerging anti-democratic movements such as violent extremism. His recent research on radicalization explores pathways to violent jihadism among young people in the UK, France, and United States. And he's one of the senior researchers in the Participation Project, looking at the drivers, dynamics, and new forms of extremism in Europe today. We will then have a follow-on contribution from Dr. Francesco Farinelli, the program director of the European Foundation for Democracy. Francesco is a member of the EU Commission's Radicalization Awareness Network expert pool and a consultant at the study center Nomos Centro Studi Parlamentari. He obtained his PhD in history with a dissertation on the relationship between history and fiction in media narratives relating to terrorist events in the framework of the Joint International Program on Humanism, Neo-Humanism, and Post-Humanism in the Age of Media of the University of Bologna and Brown University. He's the author of essays in the field of terrorism and handbooks aimed at offering practical tools to first-line practitioners for the prevention of radicalization. His expertise in publication include the study of fake news, propaganda, and conspiracy theories in media narratives and their impact on society. And Francesca will be speaking to us on those themes today. We also have a video contribution from Dr. Lisa Shirk. Lisa's been one of the leading contributors to the field of peace building for the past 25 years. Today, she's the Director of Social Media, Technology, and Peace Building at the Toda Peace Institute and the editor of the recently published book, The Ecology of Violent Extremism. We're very glad to have these 4 expert speakers contributing to our session today, and also to have everyone who's joining us as participants from across Europe and around the world. I'm going to begin, and I hope technologically that this will work quite easily, by sharing Dr. Noreen's video with us. And I will ask if you let me know if this is working for you.
Yes.
Hello, my name is Noreen Chowdhury Fink. I'm the Executive Director of the Soufan.
I don't know if you're only one, Kai, but I have missed the audio. Maybe because you muted.
You're muted, Kai.
You can't be muted while you reproduce this.
Yes, no, I was muted. I thought someone muted me on purpose because there was playback. I had not done that myself. All right, let's try that again and see if it works well this time.
Hello, my name is Noreen Chowdhury Fink. I'm the Executive Director of the Soufan Center based in New York. And I'm going to speak today a little bit about the state of extremism and populism. For 2 decades, the focus of counterterrorism has been on transnational jihadist groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS. Undoubtedly, the decentralized and transnational capacities of these groups and their ability to perpetrate spectacular events like the attacks of September 11th, 2001, the establishment of a so-called caliphate in Syria and Iraq, and the ability to incite and energize regional affiliates and local supporters have affected an unprecedented international response. In recent years, however, there has been increased focus on the violent far-right movement, or in US parlance, racially and ethnically motivated violent extremism, or REMV. For many countries, this has been approached as a largely domestic phenomenon. But as we in the Soufan Center pointed out in a 2019 report, there are increasingly transnational connections. Moreover, the development of some of these far-right groups also mirrors some of the dynamics we saw with militant Islamist and jihadist groups. And in fact, there are reports that they're often learning from each other. While many groups are developing in uniquely domestic circumstances, there are increasing linkages between far-right groups in terms of converging ideologies, drivers, tactics, and finances. We have also reported on the many opportunities for violent far-right actors to travel to conflict zones in places like the Ukraine to develop operational capacities, much like many foreign terrorist fighters travel to Syria and Iraq to join ISIS and many of their affiliates. However, in remarks before the Senate Homeland Security Committee in the US in September, FBI Director Christopher Wray described the tendency of some terrorists to be motivated by what he called a mishmash or a salad bar of ideologies. In some places, we are seeing increased convergence between neo-Nazis and white supremacist extremists, anti-government and militia actors, groups driven by violent misogyny, and those fueled by conspiracy theories. These dynamics highlight 2 important phenomena. One is the idea of the propaganda of the deed. Many extremist groups communicate by doing, whether it's attacks like the 9/11 attacks in New York and Washington and Pennsylvania, or the insurrection of January 6th in the United States. They communicate their intention and their potential through action. So it doesn't matter so much if these groups ultimately fail. In many ways, They have already shown that there is something that can be done, that there are things that can be achieved, like the establishment of a caliphate or storming of the capital. And even though they failed now, others can follow in the future. The second phenomenon is the speed of change. We are living in a combustible era of pandemic, socioeconomic loss and damage, deliberate disinformation and misinformation, and conspiracy theories. And while many conspiracy theories may be local in origin, we have also recently reported that these may be exploited by malign foreign actors to amplify the discord and the disharmony that they sow. We have also seen younger and younger perpetrators or supporters of terrorism, and that the rate of radicalization or mobilization appears to have accelerated with access to social media. So this means there are two important things among many to consider when thinking about prevention. One would be to consider acts of violence as indicators of the group. When they are committing violence against protesters, terrorizing journalists and the media, jeopardizing legitimate political processes, they mean to do so, and it should not be taken lightly. Second, we should consider the enabling environment. Terrorist groups depend on supporters and an environment that normalizes and socializes extremist views. While some extremist groups, for example, on the far right, have sought to make their messages more palatable, their intentions remain the same, and support from social and political actors helps legitimize and normalize many of these violent far-right narratives. And finally, in considering all of these measures to prevent and counter violent extremism, we should remember that human rights are not a box-ticking exercise. Violations, real or perceived on behalf of others, of human rights and civil liberties have been an important common denominator in mobilizing people to support extremist groups. So it's not only from a normative and legal standpoint that all counterterrorism measures and countering violent extremism measures need to respect human rights, but also from a strategic and operational perspective. With that, I thank you, and I hope you will join me in following our work at the Soufan Center here in New York. Thank you.
So we're very glad to have that contribution from Naureen. We hope that that provided some interesting points and input that we can bring into our discussion further together. With that, I would like to invite Kevin to provide the next contribution. Kevin, I believe you have a presentation that you had wanted to share, and we have enabled you as a host, so you should be able to do that with the share screen function.
Thank you very much. I'll just see how it goes. Has that worked? Can you see that?
That works well.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much, Kai, and thank you everyone for coming along to this discussion this afternoon, which I think is really quite critical really in terms of trying to understand the changing terrain, I suppose, of both extremism and populism in Europe. I'm going to present some work I've been doing partly as my research and ongoing project, and partly also as part of the Horizon 2020 project participation, where I'm part of a team of people working on understanding far-right extremism. And that's what I'm going to look at briefly here. Now, I think so. I'm going to focus more on far-right extremism than the broader paradigm of populism. But I think it's clear today in Europe we're witnessing what various authors call either a recomposition or a reassemblage of far-right extremism. Now, there's an older image of what far-right activists and far-right violent extremism is. It's typically associated with models of the street fighter, somebody experiencing some sort of status frustration, often a person or group displaced by immigrants. And a key issue here is their, if you like, vulnerability to becoming members of far-right organizations that seek to mobilize this sort of social dislocation. There's a language framed in terms of vulnerable groups and individuals being manipulated by recruiters. More generally, that does engage with existing models of safeguarding and how to protect people who are at risk of recruitment into groups. But this is just a couple of images here. Capture, I think, a model of what we sometimes think of as far-right violent extremists. Now, I think what we're seeing now is that reality certainly still exists. Football hooliganism, there are still pathways into extremism clearly corresponding to that model. However, I think it's very important that we recognize the process of transformation going on at the moment. And here I've just quoted from a screen grab of the video put together by Stefan Ballier, the author of The Attack in Halle on the 9th of October, the day of Yom Kippur in 2019. Now he opens his video that he live streams his killing, or he attempts his killings. He live streams it. He takes great time to pick his soundtrack that's going to follow him along. I'm just going to talk very briefly here. He speaks in English. He's addressing a world out there. He says, "My name is Anon." And that's a reflection of the fact that he's a frequenter of 4chan, 8chan, and that world where participants call themselves Anon. And he sums up, in a sense, what he's doing by saying, I think the Holocaust never happened. So he established himself as a Holocaust denier. Feminism is the cause of the decline of the West, which acts as a scapegoat for mass immigration. And the root of all these problems is a Jew. Would you like to be friends? So he's, in a sense, trying to build relationships with others. He's live streaming his video. He sets out to massacre people at a synagogue. He fails to do so, so murders a passerby and then somebody else in a food shop, in a Turkish food shop in Halle. Now, this captures important themes in this kind of extremism at the moment. Misogyny and coming out of incel patterns, a renewal of and a revitalization of anti-Semitism, and then using this as a platform to build relationships. Would you like to be friends? He's live streaming this. He's not a lone wolf. He uploads it to a gaming platform. He puts together a manifesto. It's framed in the language of gaming. It's imaginary. It's a list of achievements. He's talking about Japanese manga, mythical figures such as waifus, Nordic themes as well. It's a long way from classical expressions of neo-Nazism. There's something quite different happening here. It's very important to understand because of the potential that this has in this case towards violence. The second case is one that happened a couple of months before outside of Oslo, an attempt by Philip Manshaus to kill people at a mosque. Thankfully, his attempt failed, but he did succeed in murdering his stepsister before he went. So the fact that he's killed his sister indicates something about destroying not only the world, but in part at least, his own world. Here we can see the two themes, I suppose, joining together is who he is or what he claims to be. One, both from the courtroom, a classical Nazi salute. The other, the OK signal, created upon 4chan in 2017, from Operation OKKK, a modern symbol coming out of 4chan of what it means to be on the right, extreme right. And here, he puts together a meme that he sticks up in the hours before he goes to kill people. He refers to Saint Tarrant. He's drawing on the killing in New Zealand. There's a model here of saints and chads, which is something straight out of incel imaginary. This graphic is an incel graphic. And it mirrors a model of fandom. The third is the killings in Hanau on the 19th of February 2020, last year. Tobias Rathjen kills 9 people in 2 shisha bars. He then returns home, kills his mother, then himself. So he's also destroying his world, an important characteristic of jihadist violence as well. And he too highlights the fact in his manifesto that he's been unable to have intimate relationships with women. in his video, which is widely available in the public domain. He also says the United States is controlled by Satanists who live in underground bunkers who are trafficking and killing children. Now that's, of course, before. I won't go into his video there. Now, what is he telling us about? These are, in a way, highlighting a very important thing to think about, which is the gamification of terrorist violence. There's something going on here. These people are talking about hidden conspiracies. These conspiracies are not about ideology fundamentally. You enter them in the way you enter an alternate reality game. There are clues, there are links, there's excitement, there's urgency, there's hidden meaning, there's the pleasure of discovery and awe at the scale of what you have discovered. That's evident in terms of the development of Pizzagate that emerged in a game in one day, 24 hours in November 2016 on 4chan, where Democrat politicians were supposedly involved in child trafficking. This image on the top right is from London late last year, a demonstration against child trafficking. And then that's radicalized on the same website through QAnon with the claim that, in fact, the United States is governed by pedophiles who are involved in Satanism and child murder and cannibalism. Together, this highlights the development of child protection as a pathway into being radicalized. And you can see the image again here from London, two people, part of a group called Save Our Children, who, in a sense, have emerged out of QAnon as a conspiracy, but as an important pathway into extremism. The world, if you like, such a radical collapse of trust that the world is run by people who are Satanists killing children. Now, just very briefly to understand this, the recomposition going on, we can see that model of the game. We can see increasing extremism hiding in plain sight around food cultures. Here's a video I copied this morning from YouTube from a German group still up there, neo-Nazi vegans, balaclava kitchen, fashion. Again, this is from what you can buy this morning from a Viking explicitly neo-Nazi brand, drawing on the semantic capital, if you like, of rebellion and the commodification of protest that many actors, in this case, Nazi imaginaries, are associated with. And here I refer to the important work of an Austrian fashion theorist exploring these kind of movements. This is very important to understand a particular kind of commodification framed within the Nazi imaginary. And this hiding in plain sight is not only in terms of fashion, but also in terms of the myriad of symbols embedded in public space at the moment, framed in terms of irony and humor, and very much in terms of parody, which involves capturing the structure of something in order to attack it. It's very important in terms of contemporary extremism and the pathways into it. Here are images of Kyrgyzstan, again, another group that emerged out of 4chan in 2017, with the Kyrgyzstani flag modeled on the Nazi war flag, was flown at the attack on the Capitol building in the United States, and is still used in demonstrations across Europe today. And you can still buy it on various Amazon websites. The second last point to make in terms of this kind of recomposition is we are a long way from political ideologies. There's a discussion about how important politics is in this and what else is going on here. I'm in the, if you like, group of people who say that politics is secondary. There's other things happening here. And we can see, if you look at the importance of the occult, Satanism and myth here, the effect of awe, fascination, and a visible convergence with jihadism. That bottom left-hand tweet there from Twitter from last year, from a British group, System Resistance Network, a Nazi group that's only recently been banned. They are talking about the I, the subject, and death in a way that mirrors very much jihadism. We have to note again the importance of the far right in Instagram and the emergence of a new generation of influencers. This is again taken down from this Instagram this morning. Estelle Redpill in France, meeting with Renaud Camus, the promoter of the Great Replacement theory, which is one of the fundamental drivers of racism and violence at the moment. So I just want to try to finish this. We're seeing a recomposition of the far right at the moment. From it, we need to move away from a model framing the organization and lone wolf. In complex societies, communication is organization. So we have to focus on the kinds of communication, structuring or building these worlds. In that sense, radicalization is less a practice of recruitment, it's more a process of becoming part of world building. And very important, many of those forms of world building take the form of alternate reality games. And the example is the impact of QAnon. Digital technologies are very important here. Digital technologies don't cause radicalization, but they appear to many of us to make the whole world accessible and controllable. And that's a very important part of the recomposition of far-right extremism at the moment. So in terms of what the practice implications are, I think there are a couple. I do think we need to move beyond the search for recruiters and vulnerable people being used by them. And we need to understand that pathways of agency involved in radicalization. In particular, when someone says, I did the research. Because that's a very common answer now when you speak to people who are radicalized along right-wing extremism. So this, I think, very much demands a focus on experience of radicalization and extremism. And it's a real challenge to build new collaborations between researchers and practitioners to map what in many ways is a quite new reality emerging in Europe at the moment. So thank you very much. Oh,
Kevin,
there we go. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for an absolutely superb input, bringing up many very interesting themes, which I look forward to our discussing and exploring together further in the discussion session. I'd like now to invite Francesco. Francesco, you also have been invited as a host. You should be able to share your presentation if you have one and need to. We're going to turn the floor over to you. I'd also just like to remind everyone, this is being broadcast streamed live on YouTube. So if you would like to, you can share it on YouTube as well. We have the post above from Javier. Javier, perhaps you can post that again, and we'd invite participants and colleagues to share the live streaming so that others can join us in this session. You can also use the hashtag that I will add here, EUPrevent or EUPrevent 2021. Again, thank you, Kevin, very much for your presentation. Francesco, wonderful to have you with us. The microphone and floor are yours.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thanks very much, Kay, for having invited me. I will shortly introduce with a quick snapshot a topic that I think represents a very current issue, especially in the era of the COVID-19 pandemic, which is the issue of conspiracy theories and their links with populism and extremism. Because conspiracy theories and conspiracy beliefs, let's say, flourish in every period of crisis, and there's no doubt that the COVID-19 crisis brought with it doubt, anxiety, and threats to the lives of millions of people. And conspiratorial narratives flourish in such a context. Extremist groups, especially from the Islamist and the right-wing side of the extremism scenario, exploited the spread of the coronavirus to disseminate online fake news, conspiracy theories, and to incite violence in a period when people were isolated within their homes, making the web their main source of information, or even today when the situation is still partially unsolved. As the research so far conducted demonstrated, the most common crisis narratives used by extremists include conspiracies, and especially the belief that outgroups are engaged in secret actions to control in-group outcomes. In the COVID-19 context, the main targets of this series of hoaxes and conspiracy theories, especially from right-wing extremists, were Jews, Muslims, Asians, the EU, and foreigners in general, especially I would say immigrants. Extremist groups of all kinds have and continue to use conspiracy theories to explain, to justify their action, to attract followers, to advance their agendas. And I think it must be noted that conspiracy theories can also overlap even across opposite extremist groups and serve as radicalizing multiplier. As a concrete example, a strong overlap between right-wing Islamist and left-wing extremism undoubtedly lies in the anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. So why conspiracy theories and extremist groups appear to be linked under many ways? Primarily, I would say because conspiracy theories can play an important social role for extremist groups, and especially by presenting such theories as revelations devoted to bringing the real knowledge, the hidden meaning to those who deserve to know the truth. Providing clear narratives as a solution against the complexity, against the many uncertainties of life. Also adding a sense of urgency. Kevin was talking about this before, urgency to fighting for the right thing. No? The urgency also acts as a justification for violence towards opponents, since according to these narratives, there are no alternatives. We have to act, and we have to do it. We have to act now. It must also be noticed that they help in producing feelings of victimization, and I would say especially in inverting victims and perpetrators. A striking example in this regard is the Protocols of the Elder of Zion, one of the most influential forgeries of the 20th century, which aims at inverting roles between victims and perpetrators, since according to this narrative, the Jews, the out group, conspired to dominate the world and invented anti-Semitism to hide their real intentions and objectives against non-Jewish people, against the in-group. But also, to go on with the social role played by conspiracy theories for extremist groups, I would say also exacerbating an us versus them perspective, attributing the real or perceived problems afflicting the in-group to secret, illegal acts carried out by this powerful cabal of mysterious outgroups, delegitimizing dissident voices as being part of the conspiracies, which is obviously very useful for extremist groups, enhancing in general the appeal of extremist ideologies and narratives, because what we have to keep in mind is that conspiracy theories are seductive, or let's say more seductive than academic researches for many people. And I could go on. So the justification of existing prejudices, spreading distrust between citizen communities and institutions, or the promotion of a political or ideological agenda to the detriment of the truth. Obviously, we have to clarify that some conspiracy theories are, we could say, harmless, that a belief in conspiracy theories is not a sufficient condition for carrying out extreme action, because peaceful groups who believe in conspiracy theories exist. We could take the example of some right-wing populist movement, which often adopt conspiracy theories without directly resorting to physical violence. The main concern in this regard that I think should not be underestimated is the fact that these kinds of theories can nonetheless popularize xenophobia, popularize authoritarianism, conspiracism, with the risk of legitimizing discrimination, for instance, or as I was saying, eroding trust in democratic institutions, even without resorting, I mean, into violence. Now, as far as the the populism is concerned, I've been asked to talk about links between conspiracy theories, extremism, and populism. If we consider populism as an ideology that considers society to be divided into, the pure people and the corrupt elite, no? I think that despite all the existing differences across times and regions, we can see that this worldview of societies has a lot in common with conspiracy theories. And not only because conspiracy theories are primarily morality tales, fostering social divisions between in-groups and out-groups, but talking about the links between the ideology of populism and conspiracy theories, we can also list the fact that both are often seen as distorted and simplistic responses to some pressing issues in society. Both are considered to thrive particularly well on the internet, with echo chambers, with alternative and social media, counterpublics. Both are frequently described as a danger to democracy and seen as closely tied to extremism, and both share this Manichaean worldview that postulates a conflict between good and evil, the people and the elite. So we have populism on one hand, stressing the innocence of the people, and conspiracy theories on the other hand, stressing their lack of knowledge about the secret plot. And furthermore, conspiracy theories as a tool of mobilization have been used by populist leaders, let's say, to fashion themselves, as an anti-establishment people, because both populism and conspiracy theories are stigmatized by the mainstream and the elites. In this regard, some scholars argue that there can be no populism without conspiracy theories. From the perspective of conspiracy theory studies, conspiracy theories are defined as populist. This is true, but it is also clearly expressed that not all populist movements rely on conspiracy theories. And I personally agree with those who say there is evidence that suggests that conspiracy theories are widely spread in many populist movements, but not all followers actually believe them. The proof of this is the fact that populist movements are successful at integrating both those who believe in conspiracy theories and those who do not. As a partial conclusion of this snapshot, I want to share with you also a reflection regarding how to address conspiracy theories, considering the fact that doing nothing to counteract them obviously is not a solution. For the time being, there are mainly two schools of thought on why conspiracy theories form, conspiracy theories proliferate. The paranoid perspective, let's call it, and the cultural sociological perspective. The latter, in particular, the cultural sociological perspective, looks at conspiracy theories as a form of populist protest against the so-called powerful elites, and on the fact that conspiracy theories may constitute the symptoms of social tensions that need to be resolved. This basically means that they cannot be addressed focusing only on the theories themselves, without considering, for instance, the conspiracy theorists' overall worldview, or the existence of a broader disease in society that can include social, political, ideological, psychological, and economic issues, obviously. And this is the reason why, for instance, rebutting conspiracy theories may sometimes be counterproductive, risking to further spread some theories, because rebutting does not does not necessarily mean persuading people about the fallacy of a theory, no? And the risk of producing the opposite effect must be taken into consideration. So unfortunately, preventing harmful conspiracy theories to gain a foothold in society without addressing their root causes through our focused policies, for instance, on a broad level, I would say, can be partially ineffective. Obviously, certain personality traits or social status or minority status are very difficult, if not impossible to change, but for instance, reducing feelings of uncertainty, of mistrust, powerlessness, feelings of lack of control, that are found to be important factors that enhance conspiracy thinking, can be a possible way. Then there are obviously some helpful approaches to prevent the negative impact of conspiracy theories or to debunk them. And we can discuss these later if this is of interest for you. So thanks very much again for having invited me, and I remain available for your questions should you have some questions. Thank you.
Francesco, thank you so much. Another excellent and very interesting presentation, raising so many themes that will be taken up further. Again, I'm going to invite everyone joining us in the audience, as you're listening to these presentations, if you'd like to note down key points of interest to you, questions you'd like to raise, and you're also very warmly welcomed and encouraged, use the chat space, as many participants already are, and bring in and include your questions there. I would just note quite a few have been putting into panelists. If that is the option available for you, please use that. If you can put panelists and attendees so that everyone can see your questions, please add them there. I'm now going to take us back to the PowerPoint presentation for our third or our second video. This is from Dr. Lisa Shirk, and I'm hoping that this version will work here.
Hi, my name is Lisa Shirk, and I'm going to give a brief talk on transforming polarization and violent radicalization in the face of a syndemic. And the syndemic is a mix of a variety of different types of crises that are interacting with each other in a synergistic sort of way. And so we'll touch briefly on the different crises listed here and talk about how they might be interacting. This diagram is coming from this book that I edited, The Ecology of Violent Extremism, which provides a peace-building approach on thinking about radicalization and violent extremism. And it really focuses on this corner blue box of what is the context, and all of these crises, the syndemic that we're living through right now, are part of existing context. And we can think of one type of polarization where there may be a focus on issues. Maybe say we believe in climate change, or we don't believe in climate change, or we believe in the pandemic, or we don't believe in COVID-19. Issue polarization isn't necessarily a threat. And you can have issue polarization, differing ideas, basically, and you can still have a multicultural democracy. But when you have affect polarization, these different issues are lining up. And so really polarizing people into two very different camps on many of these crises, including your stance on migration, your stance on climate change, your stance on COVID-19, your stance on gender and race and colonization. And what's dangerous about polarization is when there is this affect polarization where one group sees the other as an existential threat. That's one aspect of it. The other aspect is that maybe one group sees a hierarchy in terms of whose life matters. So we know in terms of gender and sex and race, often some groups, especially violent extremist groups, have a perspective that ranks some lives as more valuable than others. And violent extremist beliefs emerge from that type of affect polarization. So people are recruited in a situation where there is a crisis and there's polarization within the crisis. This next box here really tries to look at how the context that we're living in today has so many factors that are in fact polarized in a layered sort of way. As I've noted, the climate crisis, the pandemic, mass migration, weaponizable technologies, that we have an epidemic of gender-based violence that has been linked to migration, to the pandemic, and to the climate crisis. And we have this legacy, this historic context of colonization and racial injustice, which interacts with these other crises that we're seeing today. And so we have a real challenge in front of us. A peace-building approach to thinking about polarization and violent extremism kind of goes back to thinking about what are basic human needs and why are people joining conspiracy theories like QAnon or joining violent extremist groups kind of in the midst of this crisis. So we talk about human needs for identity, for belonging, for meaning, and for dignity. And if we want to build that multicultural democracy and think about peace building, we need to find ways of addressing these in the midst of these crises. So a peace-building response is very different from countering violent extremism or counterterrorism because it is looking at how do people meet their human needs within the current crisis, not so much in terms of trying to prevent certain belief systems in the midst of that or in countering terrorism in a very short-term point of view. So a peace-building approach is thinking within the systems point of view of how these things interact and how then we need to be designing integrated programming to channel that search for identity, belonging, and dignity through sort of meaningful multi-stakeholder work that may be joining people together to work on these intersecting crises. How does the climate crisis affect migration? What can we do in terms of digital online peace processes at the local level that might address people's longing for identity and belonging and dignity and give people a way of working toward that multicultural democracy within their local context? Maybe working at decolonization and racial and gender justice through digital communities of people meeting together, organizing. Maybe there's dialogue rooms where people are talking together online and working together to create new joint identities that can be harnessed to work on these other challenges together. So I wanted to give this very brief presentation just to kind of spark our imagination in terms of how we're thinking about polarization and radicalization today and what a peace-building response to that very complex crisis context might look like in terms of integrated programming rather than siloing our efforts in these areas. I'm sorry I can't be there in person. Thank you, and I hope this sparks some conversation. Hi, my name is Lisa.
And a thank you to Lisa, who is a very good friend and appreciating her contribution to this session today. With that, we have completed our 4 presentations, and we're now going to open up for questions, interaction, and discussion. We're going to have about a 15 to 20 minute space for this, and then follow that with the participant forums, where we'll be able to pursue some of the topics raised in more detail. When we get to the participant forums, we're going to have 3 different working groups. We're going to invite everyone to choose the topic that is of greatest interest to you. The first will be on looking deeper at the drivers and causes, the root causes, as Francesco said, of populism and extremism in Europe today. What do we see as the factors giving rise to these, and how can they be addressed, really focusing on solutions and how we feel we need to evolve our approach to engaging with them. The second group will be focusing on what Lisa Shirk was mentioning, a peace-building approach, and what would a comprehensive and more integrated approach to addressing populism and extremism look like. The third will be looking at populism and extremism both as challenges to democracy, but also as challenges of failures in our democratic and state governance systems today. What are those failures? What is it within our governance, economic, social systems that creates the fertile soil and gives rise to populism and extremism? And where do we need to meet the challenges? What needs to be done there to help solve these issues? But before we go to those groups, opening up the floor for discussion and interaction, we have a number of questions that have been raised. And Carla, just to share with you, yes, both the video itself is being recorded and shared on YouTube, and we will also share with everyone the presentations after. We have a question to you, Kevin. What exactly do you mean by we must engage with the agency involved in radicalization? And how should we do this? And I'd invite Kevin and Francesco also, if you'd like to share some thoughts on it. Kevin, please.
Thank you very much. And as I mentioned in the chat, I'm not sure if the person who asked the question saw it or not, but thank you first of all for the question. And it's, you can see me okay, can you?
Yes, you're coming through well.
Thank you for the question. It's a very important one. I think there's, when I say that, what I'm trying to say is the experience of becoming radicalized at some level involves a self-construction. It may be in a situation of vulnerability, but the person is not simply having something done to them. And it's very important to understand that, because when they're going to disengage from radicalization, they have to have some understanding of who they were before, who they've become, and how that might change. So understanding the agency involved in disengaging is very important. And to do that, we need to understand the agency involved in a sense, becoming an extremist. And when I say that, I'm an academic, and academics, terribly make things complicated when they can be simple. If I can make it very simple, I wrote a book a couple of years ago on jihadist radicalization. I think you can see the same pathways here. I think you can see 3 kinds of radicalization pathways, each with their own expression. First one is centered, it's not very long, but I'll take 5 minutes to explain this. The first one,
yeah.
2 minutes. 2 minutes.
2 minutes, even better. Thanks, Kevin.
First one is about I. That image I put up of those Nazis, that Nazi tweet, it's about I. If I put up an image, about a Nazi handbook written by a British Nazi. It's all about I. The word we appears once, the word I appears 75 times in it. It's about me. And what's that? Violence reveals something about me. It reveals something about the perpetrator, their greatness. The violence might be an act of purification of the self. It might be destruction of the self and the other. Both in jihadism, very important, but also in far right. There's an agency around violence making me somebody, I. There's another kind of violence. So that violence is going to be the most extreme and the most likely to involve self-destruction. There's also violence that's focused on you. And that is, violence is going to reveal something about you. And that sort of violence is going to seek to humiliate the person who's the victim. It's going to try and reveal a truth not about the perpetrator, but the victim. It's going to specifically try to dehumanize the victim, the violence will try not just to strip away life, but to strip away humanity. So that violence will be aiming at humiliating. It will also be the kind of agency we can see in a game, which is structured about competition, winners and losers, parity. I'm superior, you're inferior. So there's a kind of, and the alternate reality paradigm is very important in conspiracies generally and as in a pathway. That means you're not recruited, you become part of a social experience of playing a game. That's why gaming sites are very important to understand radicalization at the moment. It's not that there are recruiters lurking there, there are some, but fundamentally it's becoming part of an experience centered around competition. And then there's the violence about us, the agency of us. And that is where violence is about purification of us. The world is pure and impure. And there, the other is a source of contamination. That is the paradigm of racism and hate crime, where you want to liquidate the other, you want to remove the other. So they are quite different pathways into extremism. They are actually relatively easy to detect. You can talk to someone for 10 minutes and you'll understand more or less which of those pathways is on their world. They aren't totally exclusive, but they are very visible in terms of structuring what matters to those people. And that's very important in terms of thinking about how someone can understand themselves, and how they can understand another kind of relationship to others. So that's what I mean in terms of agency involved in radicalization. We just can't just put it all together. We need to think about, I mean, if you put the subjective experience there, you can in fact see different radicalization pathways where actors are involved in a process. Understand that's critical to build programs and interventions to assist people to disengage from that.
Thank you so much, Kevin, for the response. Francesca, would you like to add anything here?
Thanks, Kai. I think that all the more relevant points have been already touched. So I can only add that I completely agree that it's always very particular to realize that the dehumanization, for instance, of the victims happen under the justification that we as extremists have to attain a higher purpose and noble objectives. And also I completely agree with Kai when with Kevin when he was talking about the process of disengagement, because sometimes I have this sensation that speaking about disengagement or de-radicalization, even sometimes you can have the impression that you have shared for, I don't know, 20 years of your life, some ideals, some ideologies, some very strong convictions, and suddenly you abandon everything to leave, you leave everything to choose another path. Obviously, this is not the way how disengagement or the radicalization may happen. There are some steps, very specific steps to follow, and they very depends on the different people involved. And what I can say in this regard, this is very important, that we should imagine disengagement and the radicalization as a path. To give you an image, that goes from, I don't know, if you were a radical individual, starting from -10, well, obviously you should try to be helped to joining the point 0, but from -10 to the point 0, you have to go throughout -9, -8, -7, and so on and so forth. And this is very important. So that's why I completely agree with what Kevin was saying.
Thank you, both Kevin and Francesco. Thank you, Carola, for the question. One thing I'd like to highlight just for a moment, coming at it from some of our experiences working in peace building and with demobilization of combatants in conflict areas around the world, from Northern Ireland to Iraq, Afghanistan, Sri Lanka, Colombia, and elsewhere. One of the learnings that we've had in the field over the past 25 years is that it is not enough to speak about demobilization or disengagement. We need to speak about remobilization and healthy engagement. And I think this goes to the core concept of agency. Quite often when people are becoming mobilized or recruited into these movements, it's because they see problems. And we focus so extensively on discussing the people being mobilized, the movements mobilizing them, the problem of their being mobilized to violent extremism and violent radicalization, that we often remove our focus on the problems that are existing within our societies that might need to be addressed as well. This may not be a motivation for all, but it is a motivation for many. And many are also engaged in what they feel is frustration with elite-driven systems or systems in which they don't feel that their voice is heard. So part of a possible approach for addressing this is to look at how can we work so that citizens, youth, people of all backgrounds are actually able to have their voices heard, to feel that they are included as individuals, as communities, and in their identities in their democratic systems, and therefore to actually mobilize, empower, and engage them. I mentioned this because there is a European project now called Do One Brave Thing, which is really focusing on training, empowering, and mobilizing youth to be able both to stand up to extremism and hate, but also to become constructively involved in their communities and to find the tools and the ways that they can engage to contribute to real change, locally, nationally, and at a European level. We have a number of additional questions that have come in. One from Isabella Pilogia, question for Francesco. What, in your experience, seem to be the most common communication strategies employed by violent extremist groups to attract new joiners or to raise their issues, be it immigration, feminism, or disengaged leaders, downward economic mobility, critiquing the globalized world, and other themes raised by populists? So what are some of the communication strategies that you see being used by violent extremist groups? This was towards Francesco. If you'd like to answer that first. Kevin, if you'd like to also bring in your thoughts on that as well, that'd be wonderful. Please, Francesco.
Thank you. It's a very complicated question, but very interesting question. The first thing keep in my mind is the fact that violent extremist groups try to spread the message that they, to some extent, are there to help you because they understand what are the issues you are experiencing and that there is a solution for your problem, for the difficult situation you are facing in your life. Everyone in our life, everyone, we have many problems, many difficulties, and extremist groups try to exploit these uncertainties, these issues, these problems to propose an alternative, to propose a solution, to propose something that could make you feel good or at least better. In terms of communication, in terms of topics, obviously this can change from the different violent extremist groups, even if a lot of similarities, even if there are a lot of similarities, nonetheless. I can quote some more recurrent topics, such as especially speaking about what are the main threats who has been defined, and consequently the main targets who has been defined by extremist groups. We can list obviously the so-called system, the immigrants, the feminism to some extent, religions, Jews and Muslims in particular. And also one important aspect, if I can add only one last thing, is the fact that these narratives, which are spread among many different channels, are many often formed in a crowdsourcing way. This means that when a conspiracy theory or a narrative gain a foothold in society, then one of the stronger point it has to try to join the hearts, if I can say so, to the most possible people, is the fact that these theories, these narratives can be reshaped by the users who read the conspiracy theories, who adopt the conspiracy theories, who can reshape the conspiracy theories. All these narratives can be adapted according to very personal feelings of people. There is something, as I say, I would say, some building blocks, okay? But under these building blocks, then I am able as a user to reshape these narratives as I wish. Obviously, this depends on the different violent extremist groups. I cannot reshape, an Islamist conspiracy theories, stating that obviously I am against the Quran or something like this. But to some extent, on a general level, this possibility to reshape these narratives and the fact that you feel empowered to some extent because what you think is important, because your considerations are considered as relevant, because you don't need to be an expert to speak about something, because the experts are almost all mainstream and they are part of the conspiracy. This is very useful in terms of communication to join many people.
Thank you very much, Francesco. Kevin, communication strategies employed by violent extremist groups to attract new joiners or raise their issues.
Thank you. Thanks, Francesco. I very much agree with what you were saying. I would add basically just some examples, really, because I do think we need to distinguish. There are different kinds of strategies. One associated with what you might call the alt-right, that emerged out of when Gamergate occurred. It's a conflict in the world of gamers. People went to 4chan, then they went to 8chan. There is a process of Nazification going on there that obviously we don't have time to look at now, but it is very significant. You have a global website embedded in Nazi culture. Very, very important to understand the impact of that. From that, we see two specific means of communication. One is memes, that is churning out lots and lots of images which produce an affect that you laugh. Laughter is so important in radicalization. Forget about reading complicated texts. Laughter is a social activity. You laugh with somebody, you become part of their world. And laughter is fundamental to all forms of extremism, in particular violent extremism. From a very simple example, the school bully. Bullies don't take a victim away in private to oppress them. They want to do it in public. They want people to watch, and they want the people to watch, not just to watch, but to laugh. Because the minute they laugh, they participate in the violence, bullying. And it's an irreversible event. Once you have laughed at a person suffering, not only are you part of the action of making them suffer, you can't go back. Something has happened to you. It's not an idea. Something has happened. And you have to come to terms with that. That's an example of agency. You have to understand, what does it mean when I laughed when someone suffered? And the bully, they communicate, they want you to join them because they want to make the victim the person who's going to be expelled from the group. So what is bullying? It's an action of ritual. It's a ritual to create a group. And you get people to join the group. The bully won't say, come and hit this person or kick them. The bully will say, I'm going to humiliate the victim. You're going to join me through laughter. So humor is fundamental to engaging, to sharing in violence. It's the first step. And that's why you look at jihadism. Humor is very important in pathways into jihadist violence. And it's absolutely fundamental to understand pathways into violent right-wing extremism. Laughter. So laughter. And you can do that globally now through memes. You don't actually have to be physically present. Laughter is fundamental to the way memes work. Secondly, from that alt-right, to create alternate reality games. You enter into some game. And QAnon is fundamentally, it's a game. It's an alternate reality. you enter into. Again, you don't have to, you read things, but it's structured as a game. There are clues. There's rewards for finding out things. There's what's the next step? What's the next clue? It's structured almost like a board game. So a game. The world is not structured. I teach students, no one's going to sit down and read 500 pages. It doesn't happen. But people will join a game. People will laugh at a meme. People will be laughing when they see someone oppressing somebody. If they laugh, they join. So that's a whole pattern there. Secondly, there is in its protest, and out of QAnon and its mythology of the world being run by Satanist pedophiles, there is a significant development of groups organizing protest against child abuse. One, I won't name the name here because it's going to be recorded, but and people will join those groups thinking I'm protesting against child abuse, and they start to find themselves going down what in the world of QAnon is called follow the white rabbit. They are going down a pathway, and they believe they are genuinely concerned. They go along to a protest and they find they're in a world where they believe the world is run by Satanist pedophiles. So protest, join a protest as a medium of communication. Thirdly, very important, explicit ideological aim of Nazi groups is to say feminism is the product of Jews. Anti-Semitism, and it's had a significant impact in the world of incels. You look at incel pages on the internet at the moment, the last few years they've been full of anti-Semitism. Why? Because they believe feminism is the product of Jewish conspiracy. That's not just an accident, that's been a specific communication objective of Nazi groups in both North America and Europe. So explicit focus around the meanings of feminism in the world of building, if you like, misogyny. How do you go from being a misogynist to a Nazi? That's how that happens. And then also the last point, and I referred to it briefly by the quite well-known influencer in France, Estelle Redpill, urban change and living in a world that's changing and you don't understand it. The theme of the Great Replacement, which is being pushed constantly through Instagram, which is one of the main, and of course YouTube. The Great Replacement is that the world's changing. I may not have a place in it. And that is, again, an explicit objective of sort of intellectuals, let's say, to popularize this view, and they've done that as well. So when you look at different kinds of radicalization, there are different kinds of communication strategies, but they are all detectable, and again, relatively easy to recognize, and you need to respond to them in different ways.
Kevin, thank you so much. Absolutely excellent points. Thank you both for your responses to Isabella's questions. I would also just like to flag Naureen Chaudhuri Fink, one of the comments from her video, the importance of understanding the communication of the deed as itself one of the communication instruments and tools of extremist movements today, simply by being able to carry out the attack on Capitol Hill, by being able to attempt these attacks. It's not about whether it succeeds or not. It's the videos they make of themselves while doing it. It's showing the standing up to it. That itself becomes part of the narrative and part of the story that is created. Absolutely wonderful points. We're now going to shift to another key part of this special session, and that is the participants forum. I'm going to share with us here, and I hope that we are now seeing this, and we'll bring this up. The participants forum is intended as a space to really open up and enable all of us to engage and discuss these issues further. What is it? It's a key part of the PREVENT model. Our aim is to try and foster a community of practice, to foster a space for dialogue, exchange, hearing from each other's insights and experiences, and together deepening our shared knowledge and understanding of key issues, challenges, and opportunities in working to address extremism and populism in Europe today, and to step from receiving and hearing all of the inputs from these discussions to being able to actively reflect and contribute and share together ourselves. In the practitioners forum, all participants are invited to actively engage, to draw upon the full breadth of your expertise, knowledge, and experience to together bring forward your knowledge and insights, ideas from the presentations that you find important, and recommendations and innovations on how to address populism and extremism and the underlying issues, problems, and dynamics that give rise to them. Not with the idea that this is easy, but that it is important and necessary. So really asking us to engage actively and draw on the best of our ability and understanding to help think through and discuss together, how do we address it? How does it work? We invite everyone to take part actively. Please bring forward and share your ideas, so active participation, but also really make sure to create space for everyone to take part, active listening as well. As much as possible, be concise. I know we can have lots of points we want to make, but if we can try and make them clearly and short so that others have the opportunity to speak as well, and we can all hear from each other. Draw upon your knowledge and experience as in the group, analyze and discuss, but try to also focus on and orient to what can be done. What do you feel should be done? Or do you have examples of initiatives and work being done that you feel we need to scale and grow further? We're going to have actually about 20 to 25 minutes. We're going to see how the discussions are going, but we want to have some time to come back to bring things together. So I'll have about 20 to 25 minutes. Now, going into this is going to be a little bit complicated. So I'm not sure why the presentation comes up in this way now. Here's what we're going to need to do. I'm going to present 3 topics. Each topic has its own room because the room we're in now doesn't allow breakout rooms. So what we're going to do is our team will put the topics and the links for the different rooms in the chat. We're going to ask every participant, look at the rooms available, the different topics, think of the one most interesting to you, and click on and join that room. One group will remain in this Zoom channel. The other 2 groups will go to new Zoom channels. The way to do that will be by clicking on the link in the chat, and it will take you to that new room. You'll then have about 20 to 25 minutes to discuss together as a group there. And then our facilitators in the room with you will share the link again for this main channel and invite you to come back to the main group before we wrap up today. The first group is going to take forward this discussion on understanding populism and extremism in Europe today, knowing that these are 2 different but interconnected phenomena. What are their drivers and the root causes of these phenomena? What are their major manifestations? Take some time to discuss a bit more around that. Doesn't mean everyone comes to a consensus, but as a group, try to highlight and bring forward, both by speaking and if you want to, writing in the chat ideas as well. From that, to then orient to what policies and measures, what approaches do you believe are most important to address populism and extremism? Now, this group 1, will remain in the current Zoom room. So everyone who wants to take part in that discussion, please remain in the current Zoom room. The second group is going to be focusing on peace building and comprehensive approaches. These were not discussed that much yet in the session, but they were introduced a bit by Professor Lisa Shirk, and I know that a number of colleagues joining us today are working in this field. Are there ways of addressing extremism and populism beyond the security and top-down paradigms, some of the dominant approaches we're currently seeing in Europe and globally? What would a peace-building approach look like? We'd like to invite everyone who wishes to join this group to discuss and identify what you would see as some of the core components or pillars of a peace-building approach for addressing the drivers and causes of populism and extremism and the phenomena of populism and extremism in Europe today. If you're interested in group 2, Peace Building and Comprehensive Approaches, we'll ask you to click on the link in the chat room for group 2. If the link is not working for you when you try to click, then I'd ask you to write down this address, zoom.us/J/96300367416. If you're able to write that down or type that down on your computer, you can then enter it into a browser window and it will take you to that room. Group 3 will be addressing populism and extremism from the lens of the democratic challenge. Populism and extremism are both challenges to democracy and challenges of the breakdown or flaws in democratic or state and governance systems in Europe and more widely today. We'd like to invite you to discuss how failures or challenges and shortcomings in our current democratic and governance models may contribute to and fuel populism and extremism, and how could invigorating democracy or improving our governance systems be part of a solution to extremism and populism and the underlying governance and other social, economic, cultural problems that give rise to them. And if you wish to take part in that third group focusing on populism and extremism, the democratic challenge, you would go into breakout room 3. I believe my colleague Dana or Javier have entered these into the chat rooms. We would invite you to click on the one you want to join, and we'll now have about 25 minutes within those rooms to engage in these discussions. Group 1, understanding populism and Europe and extremism in Europe today, the challenges. Group 2, peace building approaches, and group 3, extremism and populism, the democratic challenge. And as Anna correctly said to the panelists, those should be forward slashes, not backslashes, if you're trying to write it down manually. I hope you enjoy the working groups, and we'll be back again at about 10 to 6 Central European, 10 to 7 Eastern European time.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on what part of the world you're joining from. Here is the working group for populism and extremism, and root causes and drivers, and understanding what drives the phenomena and the causes. Now, I would like to invite you, even if you are an expert in the domain, or you are starting to be very interested in the domain, to share your ideas and what you think that are the root causes and the drivers of radicalization and violent extremism. Does anyone want to share? This is, just keep in mind that this is an informal conversation, so you can share your thoughts very comfortably, and don't mind that anyone would judge you.
Can I start then?
Please, Nejla.
So I'm Nejla, and I work on the Horizon 2020 Participation Project with Kai, Isabel, and Kevin, who were talking today earlier on. So we will be doing a survey with young people at high schools and also focus groups with young people. So my concern is mainly with young people, and we know that radicalization starts early on, but so I just want to put out the question there, if any one of you has done research on it or has some ideas. Are there any specific drivers for young people, any specific areas that we should focus on, you know, in terms of capturing young people's radicalization? Are there any earlier signs that you could identify or measure that could point out to radicalization? So it's more a question to the panel, really.
Sorry, one thing, Isabella, can you maybe try to stop the live streaming on YouTube?